Welcome to this week's project class. Our sprint goal is to build a dynamic inventory risk dashboard in Excel using Power Query, Power Pivot, and DAX to predict stockouts 4 weeks ahead to prevent $1.2 million in Black Friday losses. Can you name other industries where running out of stock cause big problems? Manufacturing, concert ticketing, hospitals, you name it. Inventory risk isn't just a retail problem, it is everywhere. So let's explore our business questions for this class. The first question is, which products are at risk of stockout in the next 4 weeks? The second is, how can we forecast near future demands using historical and forecast data? The third goes thus, does current inventory cover the predicted demand for each product? The fourth question is, how can we create an automated, refreshable data model to support these analysis? The fifth question is, what impact would a demand surge have on inventory risk? The last but not the least, which product categories are most vulnerable to stockouts? These questions guide the entire structure of this session. That is from cleaning and modeling data to building interactive dashboards and simulating real-world business scenarios. Let's begin by importing our data into Power Query. So we begin to answer these questions one at a time. Remember, from our sprint planning meeting, we said we'll have the following tables: sales, inventory, forecast, and product master. All right. So in this class, we'll be importing data in a slightly different way. So let us go to data, get data. We want to get data from file, and we will get the data from Excel workbook. So it opens the folder where we have our data stored, and we want to select the inventory risk data. Then we click on import. When we click on import, we are going to see the individual sheet we have in that workbook. That is our inventory risk data workbook. So remember, we said we have the forecast table, the inventory table, the product master table, and the sales table. Initially, or in our last class, we imported these individually. But in this class, we are going to be importing all 4 tables at once. To do so, we are going to select this item, that is, select multiple items. We are going to check to select all of the items. So with this, we can pick all of them to be imported into Power Query. Once that is done, what we'll need to do is to come to load, right? Click this drop down on load and click load to. When we click load to, it processes the queries, and then we want to make sure that we can click on only create a connection. We just want to create a connection. You can uncheck this, add this data to the data model. You can uncheck it for the meantime. We click OK. Once we click OK, we will successfully create our connections, and you can see our 4 tables under our queries here. Okay, now what we must do is to look at these tables individually and see how we can clean them or transform them to meet our needs. We can start with the sales table, and from here you can either double click on a query or right click to select edit to take you back to Power Query Editor. All right, now in Power Query Editor, what we want to make sure we can do is to check if we have the right data types. The product data type should be text, and this is appropriate. The product name should be text, and this is appropriate. The date should be date. In this case, it is date and time, but we can definitely make it to just be date. Okay. So we have changed that data type to be date only instead of date and time. Then for quantity sold should be whole numbers, and that is what we have here. So this is done, so we can definitely just switch to another query. So we check for the product master, the product ID is text and it's fine. The product name is text and this is okay. The category is text and this is okay. The unit cost is decimals, as you can see. It's a decimal. That is okay because we have decimals here. So that is fine. We go to inventory. Inventory, the product ID is text and it's okay. The current stock is whole number and it's okay. Now, the last restock date is date and time. So we can just make it as date, all right? So now this is good to go. Let's go to forecast. Under forecast, the product ID is text and it's fine. The week is text and it's fine. The forecast quantity is whole number and this is good. Lest I forget, you have to always look at your headers to rename them if necessary. For instance, this forecast quantity, remember what we said in our last class, you have to rename your column so that people can easily understand what you're trying to pass or the message you're trying to pass, okay? So let's correct this or rename this to quantity. So it will be forecast quantity, okay? And so let's check the inventory. We can see the current stock and just make this current stock, make this last restock date so that it's clear. Let's make this product name, unit cost, then enter sales. We make this product name again, and then quantity sold. Okay. Remember what we did in the last class? We trimmed and cleaned. Okay. Now that we are done, the next step will be to load these to our data model. But because we had already created a connection, if you click on close and load, you find that close and load tool is grayed out. Okay. In all of these queries, you find that close and load is grayed out. So what we can do is to close Power Query Editor so that we can access what we have done from our queries and connection. Okay. If you close this, it will ask you if you want to keep changes or discard them. So we want to keep the changes we have made. So you click on keep to keep the changes while Power Query Editor closes. You can see we only have connections, right? If you like to check, you see that all we did intact. Everything is intact. What we will do now is to make sure we can actually load these to the Excel data model. You right click on each of the query. So we load them to, you can see load to here is active, and you can see that we can check data model. Okay. So if I click OK on this, we have successfully loaded forecast to the data model. Okay. Now I'll do the same for inventory. I right click and say load to. I check to data model and click OK. You can see it's loading. Let's repeat the same for product master and for sales. Okay. So we are building a Power Pivot model behind Excel. This keeps the file size low and speeds up our calculations. So this matters because you now have a centralized reusable pipeline. We can update all tables with one click. That is, if we go to our data tab and just click on refresh all, okay, you can see that we have created that pipeline. You see, they are refreshing, okay? They are refreshed now. So as global analysts, automating data preparation is 50% of your job. Power Query makes this possible even without coding. Let's head on to building a relational model in Power Pivot. So if we head on to Power Pivot, we go to Data Model and click Manage. In the data view, we can access our 4 tables. This is the forecast table, this is the inventory table, this is the product master table, and this is our sales table. Power Pivot is Excel's inbuilt engine for building data models, writing DAX formulas, and running analytics faster than worksheet-based formulas. So let's head on to the diagram view. You see, I clicked on the diagram view here. Okay, this is the diagram view. And in the diagram view, we can see our tables as diagrams. Okay, if you go back to the data view, you are going to see your individual tables as if they were in sheets in your workbook, as if to say they were in sheets. Okay. If you click on the diagram view here under view, the diagram view under view, you can see where I am. You can now see your tables as diagrams. You can just move around, okay? That you can move around. Okay. Now comes the part where we define relationships, and we'll be using the star schema, okay? So what we'll do now is we are going to arrange tables like this. We want the product master to be at the center, and the forecast table, the inventory table, and the sales table to be aligned this way. This is what we want. And there's no special reason why we want that. We just want it to be visible. So now the product master table is going to serve as our lookup table. Our sales, forecast, and inventory tables are going to serve as our facts table. So let us create these relationships. So in sales, we are going to take product ID from sales. So what I'm doing is that I'm clicking on product ID, click, hold, drag to connect to product ID in the product master. Then in the inventory, I'm also going to click, hold, and drag and connect with the product ID in the product master. I'm also going to do the same thing in the forecast table. I'm going to click, hold, and drag and drop in the product ID in the product master. So while we are doing this, that is the dragging and dropping, Power Pivot auto detects a one-to-many relationships. So this forms a star schema, a best practice in business intelligence. So the central lookup table, which is a product master, connects to multiple facts table. So now that we have created our relationship, let's go ahead to create a calendar table, okay? Creating a calendar table will help us calculate or use time intelligent functions like total year to date, dates in period, and same period last year. That is to say that without a dedicated date table, it will be difficult for us to go on with our time intelligence calculations. So we'll be doing that using Power Query. So from here now, we can just close this and we are done with creating these relationships, okay? So let's close this. So we'll head back to Power Query and then create a calendar table. I'll just simply double click on any of these queries to take me to Power Query. Now in Power Query, with our queries here, I just want to add another table or query which will be part of these queries as well. So I'm going to go to the Home tab in the Power Query editor, and I want to go to New Source, okay? I click the drop down on New Source. I go to Other Sources. I go down to Blank Query. The goal here is that we need to create our calendar table using a blank query. we are going to enter the following formula. We'll say equals list dot dates, open parentheses, hash dates, open another parentheses, and we want to enter our start date. So we want to start from 2023, then the month, the day. So say comma 7:30, comma, then the duration, duration, open parentheses, 1000. So I'm going to explain what this formula does. This formula, in simple terms, creates a list of dates starting from January 1st, 2023, and keeps going day by day for 730 days, which is 2 years. That is, if it were for 1 year, it would have been 365 days, right? So now this goes for 730 days, which is for 2 years. Now let's explain each part of the formula. The date here means that you're starting from the 1st of January 2023, and it's saying Excel, begin our date lists from this specific date. And you can look at this list now. It actually began from that specific date and kept adding 1 day after the other. The 730 here, like I said earlier, it tells Excel how many days to create. Since 365 days equals to a year, 730 days equals to 2 years. It is saying, give me 2 years worth of daily dates. Now to the duration part of the formula. This step tells how far apart each date in the list should be. So the 1 here represents 1 day. That is, add 1 day each, right? The 0 is 0 hours. This other 0, the second 0 is minutes, and the second 0 is seconds. So this duration here helps us add 1 day at a time. The first few dates, as we can see here, is the 1st of January, the 2nd of January, the 3rd of January. And so it does that until 730 dates are listed. Okay, you can see that from 2023 to 2024, that is to the last day of 2024. So let us now convert this list. Okay, we want to convert this list to table. And to do that, we are going to come here. You can see these list tools here, right? Okay, we'll click on transform on these list tools, and we'll come to say convert to table. Once we click on convert to table, it gets this for us. So it asks us to select or enter a delimiter, and we just want to leave it as this. It asks us how to handle extra columns. We just have this column, so we are going to leave it as show as error. Okay, so click OK. Once we click OK, we just have that one column, that list column out that we converted to a table. And now you can see it is set to any, and the column name is column 1. So we will have to rename this. Okay, we'll have to rename this. Double click here and call it date. Okay, and now, since we have double-clicked to call it date, we need to set it to the appropriate data type. So we'll say date. All right. So we have now saved it as date. Always remember to rename your applied step because this is a class and we don't want it to be too long. That is why we go along without renaming this. So you have to rename this. It's very important for workflow and collaboration. Okay, so we need to add 2 or 3 columns to this. We need to add the year column, month column, and week column. Okay, we need to be able to do that. Here in Power Query, it is possible. It's also possible to do that using DAX. And we have a DAX tutorial here on YouTube concerning that. But here in Power Query, we'll just go to add column and you can see dates here from date and time group, right? So click the drop down on these and say yay and just pick yay. When we do that, we will have the yay from 2023 as we have in our dates column to 2024 as we have here as well. So we'll do the same thing again, but this time make sure you are still highlighting the primary column, which is the date column, okay? And because it's a date column, you can actually access the date command. Look at this now. If I were to highlight the year column, which is whole number, if I go to add column, it will be grayed out. So kindly take note, okay? So let's highlight the date column and say add column. You see we have the date command activated. I'll click the drop down, and this time I want to add month. So I will say month. But remember, if you add this month, you are going to have the numerical month. That is 1 for January, 2 for February, and so on. If you want the name of the month, that is January, February, March instead, you pick the name of the month. So we are going to use month so that we have the numbers of the month, all right? So let's highlight the date column again, just for clarity. Click the date and I'll say month. If you say name of month, you see we have January, February corresponding to the numbers, right? So like I said, I just wanted to add this for clarity, so I'm going to take that out. So the third column we are to add will be the week number column. So this will help us calculate or indicate the week number during the year. So we'll still highlight the date column, click on add column and go to dates. Click the drop down on dates and let's go to week. Okay, we'll pick week of the year. It will give us the week number in each year. So click OK, and we can see the week number. The first week, the second week, the third week, fourth week, and so we have it until the end. Okay, so this can easily give us that. Like I said, in DAX, we can achieve this as well. Okay, now that we've done this, we have our query as just query one. So we have not renamed our query. It would be good to name our query right. So we can call this table our date table, isn't it? And so let's rename this here. So say dates and hit enter. On hit enter, we now have a fifth table called the date table. So remember, since we have done this, we have not loaded this anywhere. It's just here, isn't it? We have not loaded this anywhere. So if we are on the date here and go to home, click the drop down on close and load. You see our close and load is active. We have not created any connection, neither have we loaded this anywhere. So we'll click on close and load too. We'll say create only connection. We'll say create only connection and add this to the data model and click OK. So now it's loading, creating a connection. So we'll go to Power Pivot, right? Go to Manage. You can see now we have the date table, right? If we go to Diagram View now, you'll see that we have the date table sitting just alone, okay? So what we need to do now is to make sure we can create a relationship with this date table, okay? So let us drag now. You can see we have last restock dates in the inventory. We have dates in the sales. So we need to relate those to this, okay? Let's drag these dates to the dates here, okay, and create that relationship there. This last restock date also to date, okay? So we can create that way, okay? So now let us verify our relationships. We can do so by going to design, then under relationships, we click on manage relationships. Here we can see our active relationships. You see our first table, our cardinality, which is one to many, and then our filter directions and our second table. So with what we can see here, we are good to go. So Power Pivot stores data in memory faster than sheet-based formulas. A star schema like what we have done avoids circular references and duplication. We can now write powerful data analysis expressions like total sales and so on and so forth. So let's move on to the next session where we will write our calculations, that is data analysis expressions. Here we'll be using DAX to forecast demands, compare with inventory, and flag risks. Let's go back to the data view, okay? Then we head to our forecast table. So we want to enter this measure in our forecast table. And you can insert a measure in your calculated area here, or calculation area rather. Like I showed in the last class, you can activate and deactivate your calculation area. You can also enter a measure this way. Let us close this so that you see another way to enter a measure. Click on Power Pivot and you can see measures here. You click the drop down on measures and say new measures. When you do that, you can see now you can easily choose the table you want to insert your measures in. So we want to enter in the forecast measure, right? And the measure name will be forecast for weeks. Then let us go ahead and insert our formula. So say calculate. Let's say sum, we'll open parentheses. And now you can see here, immediately we open the parentheses, we see our tables, right? And the column headers of our table. In this case now, we want to select forecast quantity, okay? So I'll just double click to enter into my formula. All right, so forecast is a table, forecast quantity is a column in that forecast table. We'll close parentheses and say comma. We'll use dates in period. And remember, if we had not added our date table, we wouldn't have been able to use this function now. We'll say dates in period. So I'll just double click to enter into my formula. So open parentheses now. And let's take our dates now. We want dates from our date table. That is, we want the date column from our date table, right? So I'll double click to enter that. So this is the table and this is the column, right? So we'll say comma. So we'll say today, open and close parentheses, say comma, 28th day. So we'll close our parentheses for that date in period function, then close our parentheses again to close the sum parentheses here. Okay, let me explain what this formula does. Okay, so let's break it down line by line. So this forecast for weeks is the measure name. Okay, you can call it anything, but here we name it forecast for weeks, so we know it gives us forecast for the next 4 weeks. The calculate function here is the engine of DAX. So just think of it like a smart calculator that changes the filter context temporarily, then performs a calculation inside that filter. In our case, we are asking for a sum up of the forecasted quantity, but only for the next 28 days. That is what everything here is saying. The sum here now adds up the value in the forecast quantity column of the forecast table. But you see, normally this sums everything. When you say sum, it sums everything. So we are using dates in period here to say, let it sum only for the next 4 weeks, which is 28 days, right? So the dates in period here, say the dates in period today and day, this is the filter for calculate now, okay? You can see once I click on dates in period, you can see that's the filter. The sum here is the expression. The dates in period is the filter. So this is the filter. We use calculate so that we'll be able to enter an expression. So to simplify it, right, we use calculate here so that we can enter this expression. This expression should normally just sum. But now we want to sum with a certain filter condition. And that filter condition is what this dates in period will satisfy in our formula. So let's break this dates in period part or this filter part further. The dates here is our dates table, and the dates column in that our dates table, that is our calendar table that we entered the other time in Power Query. You remember that, right? The function today calculates the current dates on your computer. So it uses the current dates on your computer. 28 days now talks about the number of days. That is how many days forward you want to go. That is 28 days. So you can use, you see, number of intervals. You can use any number of dates, but because ours is for 4 weeks, okay, ours is for 4 weeks, that is why we had to make it this way. So the day here is the unit of time, okay? Here is days, not month or years, okay? So this is the unit of time. The good thing about inserting your measure through this is that you can easily from here choose your formats, okay? Now it's set to general, okay? You can decide to choose number and reduce your decimal place to 0. Okay, you can use separators for 1,000 and so on. That is the added advantage here. So if we click OK, we have successfully calculated that measure. Okay, to see that measure, come to Power Pivot, click on Manage. Then if you go to the forecast table, you will see your measure here. So, and look at the formulas that we use in calculating that measure. That is why I told you that you can also insert your measure by just coming to the calculation area here, under here, right? All of these areas under your table, right? And insert any measure you want to insert. This area will be for addition of a column, right? So this is our first measure that we added, the forecast for weeks, okay? I hope that is clear. I hope you are following. Okay, so now we will go to calculating another measure. So that measure, we will compare the forecast to inventory. It is also important to remember that your measures are tied to your models, right? They are tied to your models and also tied to your tables. So if you want to, like, we wouldn't want to calculate this forecast 4 weeks under inventory, right? It is best to calculate it here. So let's calculate the risk flag. So we want to calculate the risk flag under product master table. We will now click on any cell in this calculation area here, and we'll enter our formula for that new measure. So here, we will enter the title of the formula this way. We'll say risk flag, column, and equals if, open parenthesis, is blank, we'll open parenthesis. Now we want to refer to the measure we created earlier, which is the forecast 4 weeks. So we'll use square brackets, and immediately we enter square brackets. Within that model, we had already created just one measure, and so it recognizes that measure. If we had created more, you see more them listed here, or all of them listed here. So we'll just double click to enter that measure within our formula. We'll close our parentheses and say comma, then open quote, we'll say no forecast, close our parentheses, then say comma. Now we want to enter another if, okay? We'll say if, open parentheses again. We will say that measure now, which is forecast 4 weeks, or forecast 4 weeks, double click to enter. It's greater than sum x, open parentheses. We'll say related table, open parentheses, inventory. We have a table called inventory, double click to enter, close parentheses, comma, open square brackets. In this, double click to enter current stock, close parentheses, say comma, Open quote, we'll say at risk, we'll close quote, comma, open quote, and say okay, close quote. Let's close our parentheses for this if. You can see when you close a parenthesis, you see the parenthesis for which it is closed. It will be bold. Then you close another, you see this if for is blank is closed. So we need to close those two parentheses. Now let's break this formula down step by step. Is blank here checks if the 4 weeks forecast is empty or missing. If this 4-week forecast is empty or missing, that is, if true, it will return no forecast. Okay, maybe this product has no upcoming forecast data. If false, it will move on to the next check. And the next check is this if, right? But if it is empty or blank, it will stop there, right? Do you understand? This if is blank or is blank here is the condition that checks if a forecast is blank. If it's blank, that is null, it will return no forecast and end there. If it's not blank, it will move to the second condition, which is this if again, which forecast 4 weeks is greater than sum x. Now, the difference between sum and sum x is the expression we can add within the sum x. The sum just aggregates, sums the content of a particular column, while sum x sums and adds an expression to that sum as well. This is the main decision block, right? And what happens here is that forecast for week is predicted number of units we expect to sell in the next 4 weeks. So this sum x related table inventory current stock here is how much stock we currently have for that product. Okay, we could just go ahead and remove this first part of if, and we work with if forecast greater than sum x related table inventory current stock at risk and okay, because the major thing we want to check is if there is at risk product or if the product is okay in our inventory table. That is what we actually want to check. And so this is the main decision block, right? So this is just added. This first part is added as an error buffer. What if we asked ourselves, what if that is blank? If it's blank, it's going to give us an error, right? And so we don't want that. And that is why we've added this first block. So let's go ahead and hit enter to calculate that measure. So we have successfully calculated our risk flag. Okay, we have calculated our risk flag. All right, let's go on to the next session where we highlight at-risk products using conditional formatting. We'll use conditional formatting to visually flag products based on stock risk. Before we do that, we'll have to insert a pivot table. We can use our required columns as well as the measures we created earlier. So although we can insert a pivot table from here in Power Pivot, let's close Power Pivot and go back to our Excel workbook. So I'm going to click in A3 here and go to Insert, right? Then in the Tables group, I'll click the drop down on Pivot Table and then click from Data Model. I'm clicking from Data Model because we don't have any physical table here in our workbook, but we have connections and relationships created in our model. So it's only the best practice to click from data model. All right, so we go ahead and say okay. As we click on okay, we have inserted that pivot table. Okay, and now you can see our pivot table fields and you see our tables and relationships here. All right, so let's start by inserting the columns we need in our pivot table areas here. Okay, so we want product name, right? So where can we find product name? We can find product name in our product master table. Okay, so let's take product name to We'll take it to rows, okay? So we can have our product names here. Then we want to take forecast for weeks to values, okay? Remember we did forecast 4 weeks, a measure. So if we go to our forecast table, expand that forecast table, you are going to see that measure we created, forecast 4 weeks. We take that, drag to what values. You see, as we drag to values, we can see our forecast 4 weeks, right? These are the values. So we also want to take current stock to values, and we can see current stock in our inventory table, right? So we have current stock there. We click, hold, drag to values as well. So we are going to see our current stock, okay? Then the next we will do is the risk flag, okay? You remember we created or entered a measure called risk flag. And we have that measure in our product master table. You can see it here. Let's take that to values. As we've taken that to values, you can see it all states that they are at risk. So before we proceed, I want to answer a question. Why is forecast here, forecast for weeks? And here we have sum of current stock, whereas the current stock in our inventory table has no sum. Where that came from is because in values here, when we take a column into the values, what happens is that if there are numerical values within that column, it sums it. If there are text values, it counts it. Okay, so that is why we have sum here on the current stock. But for this forecast, we don't have sum because it's a measure we have already calculated and named in DAX, right? Using Power Pivot, or in Power Pivot using DAX. So now we are going to make a copy of this pivot table, okay? And in that copy, the risk flag here is going to be optional. I added the risk flag so that you could see that or find use for it because we added that measure, okay? The conditional formatting here is going to do something similar to what this risk flag does. But you know, some stakeholders just want to see a visual representation. Is it at risk, red? If you ever find yourself in that situation, then using conditional formatting will be a great choice. Okay, so let's make a copy of this table, and we are going to use the get pivot data, right, to copy this table. The goal is that we want to maintain the dynamic nature of the table without necessarily converting it to a still table. What it means is that we can filter our table here because that table is connected to our pivot table. So let us label our headers properly. Okay, so we will have products here. Here we are going to have current stock, and here we will say forecast. Okay, let's begin to copy this. So under the product, I am just going to copy this. Okay, Control C on my keyboard, and I'll just paste it under product here. Okay, let's make this bold. So now, under current stock, you know that here we have sum of current stock, right? And what happens is that this sums current stock for each of the product, isn't it? So let's say equals here, and we'll go to the current stock for Antelope High Chair, click it, and you see the get pivot data, right? And we hit enter. So let's do that for the next. Okay, then the next, then the next. That will be for this sofa, okay? And we'll do that for the rest of the product. All right, now it's time for the forecast, okay? So we'll say equals, and we'll take the forecast 4 weeks that we calculated for the first product, And we'll do that for the second product, and let's continue for the rest of the products. Okay, so now whatever filter we apply to this pivot table will also apply to this copy. Okay, so now what we need to do is to use conditional formatting to flag stockout risk. Okay, so I'm going to highlight the current stock. So please do this, because even by looking at the forecast, you know that there will be stockout risk is evident, but we need to do this to practice what is meant to be done. Okay, as we've highlighted current stock, in our home tab on the ribbon, we'll go to conditional formatting and click on new rule. We want to use a formula to determine which cells to format. So click that, and then we'll enter this formula. Equals, the current stock is at G, right? And we want to have a relative reference. So we'll say $G4, and you see that G4 is G4 because it's in the G column, and our data started from, or our numbers in that column started in the fourth row. We'll say less than our forecast, right? Our forecast is in H, right? So say $H4, okay? So this now tells us or compares current stock with forecast. Forecast is in H and current stock is in G. So now we have inserted that formula. We need to format it, right? So that we actually can see. Okay, we'll click on format. So what we want to do now, we want to set a red fill, okay, to give us the look that we are looking for. So let's go to fill and we'll select this red. We'll go to font and we'll make the font white and make that font bold, okay? And we'll click OK. So you can see the preview here now, okay? So what do you think this will do? Let's click OK and see. You see everything here is red. Why is it so? It's so because our current stock is less than our forecast. And what this shows us is that there is a risk of stockout or a stockout risk. Let's say risk flag, and we'll use the if logic to add something similar to what this risk flag will do. Remember, this is just teaching you something that you can use in various situations as well. Let's do this and say, we'll say equals if, open parentheses. Our forecast is in H, right? So we want to say if forecast. So our stock is in G, right? So we want to say if stock is less than our forecast. Let's reorder, right? So let's do that. We'll say if our current stock is in G, so we'll say G4, if G4 is less than, our forecast is in H, is less than H4, comma, open quote, and say reorder now. Then we close quote, okay? The reorder now is the value if true. What of the value if false? What if our current stock is equal to or greater than our forecast? What should it say? It should say safe, okay? It should say safe. So open quote and say safe. That is the value if false. Then close quote and close our parentheses and then hit enter. You can see now it says reorder now. If we autofill this, you see that everything is on reorder now. It's on reorder now because our current stock is less than our forecast. If for any reason this is, let's use this last one. Assuming we had something here, say 12, for instance, what happened? You see it is safe, and now we don't have it as a risk anymore because it is safe, because our forecast is less than the current stock. So let us undo that. Okay, I hope that is clear. All right, now remember we said we did this, we copied this table from our pivot table because we want to maintain its dynamic nature. That is the dynamic nature of the pivot table. That's what we want to do. You know that as at this moment, everything here that we have done is the general outlook, right? As at this moment, everything we have done is just the general outlook. But we may want to filter through our data set to see the behavior of our data or of our product within a particular time frame. Okay, so let us do that by inserting filters. So I will, or slicers rather, I'll click on the pivot table, and we can do that from insert, and you insert slicers under filters. You can also do that from pivot table analyze, and you can insert that under filters. Here you see insert slicers. Okay, any one of those. So let's insert here. We go to filters and we click on slicers. When we click on slicers, because we have created relationships between these tables, you can see all our tables here, okay? These are the active tables. When you click on all, you see all the tables, okay? Now, let's pick months, okay, and click OK. You can see why I showed us the last time that you may want to insert months as name of months instead of numbers, but went ahead and inserted with numbers. So, but with this, you can still know that one is January, 12th is December. But for appropriate storytelling, it will have been better if we insert with name of months so that you see January, February, and so on. But this will still serve the purpose, right? We can still filter across, right? We can click to see the current stock. For instance, in January, there are no stock, February, no stock, March, April, May, June, July. You can see the product that are in stock. August till December, nothing in stock in December. Okay, so this is what filters will do for us. Okay, so let's rename this sheet as conditional flag. So we will create another sheet so we can create a dynamic what-if analysis to test how products perform under increased demands using Excel's data model and DAX measures. In A1 here, I want to enter a label, say surge factor. Then in A2, I'll go with 1. That is, I'll enter 1. And I want to format this to a decimal. Okay. I'll format this to a decimal. I want to also create a search control table here. So I'm still going to enter the heading search factor, and I'm going to link this search factor to this. So I'll say equals. I pick this and say enter. Okay, I just want the connection between these two. All right, so I'm going to highlight this and say Control T to make this to be in a table format. And I will name this table search control instead of just table. If you click on the table, you see under table design, you see table name is on table 2 right now. So I'm going to change it to search control. Hit enter. That becomes our search control table. So I'll load this now so that we can have it in our model, right? So that we can easily create DAX measures with it. Okay. I'll go to data and I'll click from table or range. Okay, so it takes that table that I'm clicked in, which is a search control table. Okay, then I'll load it. Okay, I want to load it to our data model. So I'm going to say only connection and data model because I already have that table here. I don't want to duplicate that table or load it into another sheet. So I'll say, okay, so we have it, search control loaded. I'll go to Power Pivot now and go to manage. I have that search control table now here, okay? I want to calculate adjusted forecast. That is a search adjusted forecast, Okay, so I'll click here to enter or insert that measure, which I say is surge adjusted forecast. I will now say column equals. So I want to use the forecast for weeks that we created earlier. Okay, double click to enter, multiply by if, open parenthesis. We'll use the function has one value, open parenthesis. Let's reference the search control table and the search factor column, close parenthesis, we say comma, values, open parenthesis, the search control table and the search factor column again, comma, close parenthesis, comma, 1. And let's close the parenthesis for our entire if. Okay, so we could simplify this DAS by using just one function, the selected values. But since most of you are using Excel version that won't have that selected values, that is why we are using this. But when we get to Power BI, we are going to simplify this by using selected value. So the has one value here checks if only one value exists in the column, and values here returns the single value. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and hit enter. We have calculated our surge adjusted forecast. So we need to calculate another DAS, or we need to enter another DAS. And you know that we have entered a risk flag before. We'll say risk underscore flag to differentiate it from the risk flag we entered earlier. Say risk underscore flag equals if, open parenthesis, and we'll say surge adjusted forecast, right? That is the measure we just entered, okay? You can see we have it here. Surge adjusted forecast is greater than, say, sum, open parenthesis. We have our current stock in our inventory table, right? So this is it, current stock. We close our parenthesis, right? And close the parenthesis for the if. So this is the same thing as calculating the measure for current stock, okay? So we'll say comma. We now will enter our results if value is true. So what would that be? Open quote, we'll say at risk, close quote. Then what about the value if false? We'll open quote and say okay and close quote. Then we close final parenthesis. Okay, we go ahead and hit enter. So we have calculated that risk flag to use for this what if analysis. So let us close this and insert a pivot table. Okay, we close this, and here let's insert a pivot table. So go to insert pivot table from data model. Okay, we want to insert it in this existing worksheet. We'll click OK. So let's do this. In our product master, we have our product name, right? We have our product name. We pick the product name to roles. Then we want to insert the forecast for weeks that we created earlier. So we go to forecast. We have that measure forecast for week. We put it in values. We also want to insert the surge adjusted forecast that we created, right? That will be under our search control. We pick it and drop it in values, okay? The reason you see this flag here is because remember when we created our model earlier, we did not include the new search factor table. We did not include it. That is why you're seeing that there is no relationship, and relationship may be needed. But let's go ahead, okay? So let us pick current stock. Current stock is in inventory. So we are going to pick current stock to values as well. That's the current stock value. Then we want to pick our risk flag that we just created under our search control table. We put it in values as well. You can see that now. Okay. So basically what we want to be able to do, now is to actually test our scenarios, right? We want to know if we increase the search factor, how it's going to affect our forecast. Okay, so you can see that we are already at risk, right, of stockout. So, but let us go ahead and test this search factor that we created here. Okay, so what we'll do is that we said we wanted in our business questions, we wanted to see a surge of 1, 1.5, and 2, right? So let's make this 1.5, okay? Hit enter. But to look at the effect on our pivot table, we have to click on the pivot table and click on pivot table analyze, then click on refresh here. So what will happen is that it will add 50% on our adjusted forecast. You can see the change now, right? So this is just a scenario-based analysis for us to see how this works, okay? Now, the only difference is that we can check the different factors. If we increase the surge factor, or we improve, or we want to test the different levels at which we might be at risk. That is why we use this. Else, this would have still given us the same result. We already know that we are at risk of stockouts. The conditional formatting here also shows that we are at risk of stockout. What our advice will be is that in 4 weeks, we will experience a stockout and we will lose so much money because our customers will not find orders, because currently we have 101 for the Antelope high chairs, but in 4 weeks, our forecast shows that these products will all be gone and we will not have products for sale. So the advice will be that you restock immediately. So that will be our conclusion. So remember to ask your questions and practice this. Do have a wonderful day ahead.